Julia with Sirius Star this morning. This is Mercury hour, Venus day, Mars night. Black Moon Lilith is 29 degrees Scorpio. She on my lot of divination. I don't feel like I have new things to say more than I just said. Um, I did my Tude series in Candle Flame. Moon is in Libra, 5 degrees, and the Venus, 15 degrees Sag. Mercury is 1 degree Sag. I don't know why I had the urge to say that to the entire world. But um, with the Neptune Saturn ingress to Aries, the people that are doing channeling and divination will begin to develop the discernment and the skill to see faces. Mars is names, but Aries is face. Now, we have to understand that with Neptune, the discernment skill will might take time to develop because, for example, if in Pisces we read energies and consciousnesses, there was a blending of consciousness. So with Neptune, many people began to feel blend of consciousness, and they could identify the different consciousnesses. With Pluto in Aquarius, that develops into full-blown telepathy. And then, of course, people have to develop the discernment. So, for example, if we get into true crime, then the trace of consciousness, for example, seeing one consciousness or one energy, doesn't always mean it's that person, because people can torture two people and then be a third party that takes on their consciousness as they torture one another to create chaos. And not only that, because it's a web or a network of, then that begins to be almost encrypted in that sense. But that is the sense in which it gets encrypted. Okay? That's pretty much the structure of that encryption. And if people do trace a process from start to end, they will be able to tell the consciousnesses. I don't have this particular skill, but with Neptune ingress to Aries, people are going to begin to see faces. And by the way, with Jupiter sign, people see there were the things that were leaking regarding to the sexual health of the seed, the semen, and um, and yes, sometimes the boys were harmed, and the for those who, I don't do remote viewing, but the few things that I received, regardless of not doing remote viewing, was the boys that were harmed by the semen. Um, and that's basically the way semen was used in the extortion cults, because it's a consecration. So it's and they were doing basically the supposedly the sacrilege of consecration, but they were doing that on boys, maybe infants. Um, I saw specifically boys. Um, the the topic of face now with Mars square Neptune. I got the insight that the divination people will be able to divine the face of people, and um, that has to do with war. So people will be able to divine by the face of the people that went missing, which is another Neptune. But they will be able to channel and divine the faces of people, but also another skill I carried in my family because when my grandfather escaped the Holocaust, he knew the physiognomy of people's faces because he had to tell which people he had to ask for help. Um, my mother would know, except for me because I was too close to her emotionally, but she would know to divine which person went through sexual abuse as child. She would see it. Even the ritual satanic abuse survivor and healer Annika Lucas, she talked about the torture that was made to make the children delineate the sexual fantasy, supposedly. Why supposedly? Because the tortured person will have various personalities, and they had to, in a flinch of an eye, see that personality switching and accommodate to that. Um, and for me, I began to see things in the faces of people. When I was tortured, I was working on Peter's chart when I was tortured. Then it leaked out. And because I saw the face, um, and I began to see those things a bit, not entirely, but a bit like my mom. I began to see um, the connection. Okay, of course it affects our faces. Um, um, but for people that are divining as in true crime, they will be able to divine face, and we'll have to see if they divine the face of the consciousness that presents itself or the original face. People are going to ask themselves, is this the origin, is this the original, with Neptune in Aries a lot. Um, I remember I used to, with Saturn in Pisces, I used to divine the teeth structure. If some consciousness would melt or blend with my consciousness, then I would at one time divine the teeth structure. Particularly the smile, the teeth is coming, and by that I would identify the consciousness. Um, Previously it was just energy. Not for all people, depending. But yeah, in Aries it's going to be faces. I don't know why I have to share it with the world. I did see faces I don't know. I saw faces a lot as well. Not in true crime. Maybe because I have Mercury. I don't know. The thing about, unfortunately, why with violence people get hyper vigilant and the alert level. This is also how many people got empath. I had to deal significant. I remember when I went to therapy in the first year of my second degree. Um, there were big campaigns around feminism, and it was just fucking triggering. And I went to therapy. I was like, I had no idea why. And the therapist, like it was not the but that guy had shit on him too, probably. um, maybe even Scientology. So he began to see that 99% of what I was processing was not mine. I experienced it as though it was mine. Um, and then when I talked about feeling the feelings that are not my own, he got cold feet. I don't know, because I began to expose maybe the secret society that he's in. Stimmt. um, and he had problems with accepting people's testimony about their sexuality. Yeah, like you say, if I would mention ace people, then say doesn't think that that exists. Um, First, I thought that he was denoting a trauma, but then he thought that he knows what people sexuality is. I'm not talking about gender, which showed that he was programmed, very likely. Um, yes, so um, this is how people become empaths. And when it came to the issue with the face, um, again, when we want cohesion, when we want truth, we need for the people to have housing first, independent of ability to work, because that's the basic survival need, um, and to believe the testimony, of course, and for them to not be tortured. Um, okay, so that we know we're dealing with post-trauma and not ongoing trauma. I think 99% of the cases of people, when they say post-trauma, is not post. People are still dealing, whether it's MK often or similar projects, or it's a web of mind control. And because of those psychic aspects and technology interface psychic aspects, we will not have the Me Too going anywhere or reaching anything without discussing those aspects. This is why, this is what I said also during the Me Too, but nobody wanted to listen, even 8 years after they had a very big but partial success with litigating academic institutions. They didn't straight out say human trafficking, which I thought works against them juristically. Okay, they didn't go for the bigger case, and this is why they didn't get the actual win. That's usually what I noticed that it goes. Also, for me, when I would want to talk about something I couldn't fully express myself, or if that would be silence, then I would find myself talking even more and finding out even more truth. And that's usually with the case. People don't go for the bigger issue, then what would happen? They would have partial success, they'd have to deal with a bigger issue. For example, oh, why can't I work? Because you went through trauma that you still have dissociation from, and you don't always remember, and that was done to make sure you won't be able to work or speak, that you will only be able to work if you're trafficked or MK Ultra full-blown MK Ultra. And then you began to come out of it, and not only that, litigated for it, so they would do everything so that you wouldn't work, and you wouldn't have an income, but then you will have to address the fact that your parents' house probably is associated with what is the government, the cult that rapes the children. So yeah, litigating an academic institution is a big deal. It's taking advantage of the privilege one has socially to make justice, and it's beyond appreciated. And of course, we can't work when. Um, and then people have to play pretend that they don't understand because they fear for their life. And they said, if we will not have trafficking-free academia without addressing that. And hey, also the people inside those networks, the traffickers, are fearing for their lives. So if we break through the silence, yes, this person has risked their lives. For 3 years, they were threatened by weird calls, and they were looking for a job. So they had to answer the type of places that would hire them would have no number. so they had to answer, and they were threatened for their life for 2 years by the cult members in the academia that were trafficked. The money from the academia was funneled to traffic the people and paid in the hotels. And you can imagine that I will not say exactly what department, but you can imagine it's one of those departments where something to do with the children. Okay, so and people think it's one university. No, it's not. Both me and that person were exiled from academic conversational digital discourse spaces because we did not comply with the silence code. And they would persecute the people who talk. So that is, but then they had to deal with the shadow of a family member that they lost and grieved tremendously. Lost more than one, I think. And the fact that they may have been so much so as on Epstein, like I wouldn't know. Like I wouldn't. If not them, then their associates. Going against the other prime minister is not going to solve the case. For me, having to deal with the shadow that if I would be born before the wars, if there would not be world wars, and I would be born to my grandfather's lineage in Sarni, I don't know if I would have sovereignty, the ability to decide who to marry, the ability to get out if something happens. Unless I would be a doctor and I would hit him with a pen. And the entire family of grandfather, except for his brother, was lost in the Holocaust. And my grandfather had typhus. It's kind of like, I don't know if a woman could smuggle him if he didn't have typhus. Like, I really, maybe yes, maybe no. But I do know that my mother never left me alone next to him for a reason. Holocaust survivor. So, and he was the one in the family that was a business owner. And I noticed that I had to tend to the ritual satanic abuse upon looking at what are the blocks to my business. And my mother always had her own business. Hardly ever she was the type of person who could not work in a corporation. So the entrepreneurship is actually from my grandfather's lineage. Um, so I think we're going to, with Neptune in Aries, it's kind of like people are going to both learn about their origin but be able to channel and divine their origin as well. And they're going to be able to see the physiognomy. Be connected with the origin, with the bloodline. And we have to take into account that the brain is the plasticity of the brain. Now, plasticity of the brain is a misleading term because what we mean by plasticity is that the brain crosses a threshold and changes, but with plasticity we say we can't unboil an egg. And counter to what people believe when it comes to many things regarding the nervous system, including people that couldn't move a limb, we can unboil an egg. It takes months, but the vagus nerve can recover. And I'm not saying everything, but the brain can recover. This is what I was, a part of the things I was looking to in my thesis with the body-mind question. And I do believe that for the people that got harmed, and this is to do with pedophilia as well, but it's not just pedophilia. Any person that was violated, it affects the nervous system, particularly if it was in childhood, even if it was second frontier or psychic. They do ceremonies. The birth is very sensitive. Infant being in isolation or in a sleep state is very insensitive, and people outside would do rituals on these infants. Or consciousness blending, okay? And there would be nobody, as child, there would be nobody to talk to about these things. And the children that did sometimes, and this is what happened to people like Teal Swan. Teal Swan had channeling divination abilities, and then she talked to her parents, and they took her to somebody that understanding these things, so to speak, because they were Mormon, I think, and she got ritually abused. She was participating in child hunts, with her being a child, and many other horrors that they had to do to children. And when she talked about this a while ago, people swept it under the rug, isolated her, kind of like until she would stop talking about this. But that didn't work because it affects the world, and those things start to leak. Okay, we have entire generations of gators that are remembering. So the child would speak about such things. Definitely, if they saw segments of atrocities, I didn't see it with face, but segments of atrocities, and they do the personality blending. Then there would be nobody to speak about it, and the only people that would be at the healing professions, even as adults, and I had a horrid experience of that, would be part of the people that participated and participate in those rituals. And they would try to get the information from the person to perpetuate the trauma, particularly to get into the child state. So people are going to connect that to them not being able to do business or real estate because the holistic energy, the life energy, is a part of sovereignty. People will not have sovereignty in Aries before they addressed what I just said. Okay? I'm saying that you want to think about, I always talk about the gnosis before an outer planet ingresses to a sign. You can wait 15 years to tend to the MK of 10 MK Ultra extortion cults and ritual abuse. And then you'll have, and I want to also tell you, because the fact that I've been tending to that in the past several years, I went through beyond horrors, that if the world would be tending to that in the 90s, I wouldn't have to go through those horrors. I wouldn't be harmed by my therapist. I wouldn't be going through attempts to traffic me. My entire academic endeavor would be different. Now, the people that are too busy comparing what one went through, what another went through, I actually confronted a cold survivor. And I said to her, listen, during the Me Too, when I spoke with you about the cold in the academia, you attacked me. You said, I am a cold survivor, blah, 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 blah. I said, the time it took to you to understand. I went through horrors, rape, kidnapping, torture, over nothing. She had the humility to accept that. But other people don't. Women that work in filmmaking industry, Neptune, that sweep it under the rug, that there is psychic rape, that there is ritual rape going on in the psychic, that it's not misleading or this or that. No. That when somebody says no and people violate that, that's rape. Even lust spells that are done on people, they're not willing consent. Okay? They are done to siphon energy, they are done to control over the consciousness of people. And even if they're done in the most benevolent, like, oh, I desire this person to desire me, and I just learned a couple of tricks in magic, if they will enjoy it, then I will enjoy it. But what is the violation of their sovereignty? Okay, I'm talking about lust spells. Okay, I'm not talking about turning people on, or no, that's not particularly. It's going to undermine sexual satisfaction in the future and undermine relations in the future. It's usually not the context that is that, but I also want to mention the most naive. And with Eris, I always talk about the most naive interpretation. Everything that is not falls like a tower of cards. Because when we ask questions, you say, oh, why is it so actually? Then the answers begin to unfold, and the fact that the entire ritual of use, the reason they use sexual violence is to violate the identity and disconnect people from their origin, and to take over their life energy, and then they do material business, real estate, and wealth consolidation on natural resources through sex trafficking cults. And what people call sex work is the children that somehow manage to escape that setting, so they try to traffic them as adults, okay? Because they work so many years to train people to be slaves. That's the worst investment of all times. Now, I'm not saying it's not a lot of money running there, but it's investing in one's own demise, because it's putting people in a situation where to even be, they have to recover from what one is invested in, which is to take for their life energy. And the soul won't let them be until they can be. They won't be able to work. They won't be able to be healthy by the conventional medicine. They won't be able to be healthy by the holistic medicine that does not tend to the truth. Okay, those people say, oh, invasive plants are not good for you. Of course, because they're not agrarian profit. Let your food be thy medicine. Eat the organic tomatoes and not the eat the amaranths. Have a couple of organic tomatoes. That's lovely. It's nice lycopene. Fantastic. Buy it. But this is also how you'll have. Here's what people don't understand. If you feed yourself on the amaranth, then you have the money to buy the original tomatoes that the people grow, that are actually tasty and sweet and have the lycopene and so on and so forth. But if you don't even have money to buy, let alone organic food, because you're on food stamps. Food stamps is not whole foods. Even if you try to turn it into whole foods, then you will not have enough food. I'm very experienced in that. I made so many experiments with food where I tried to say, okay, I can't buy the nutrients in the local food are not sufficient if I cannot buy food by making income and so on, is because I have trauma. So the absorption of minerals by me is not sufficient. So I need an even better quality food, and then I can buy something. So even if I buy, I don't know, sprouts, broccoli sprouts that are organic, okay, fine, that's good for the nervous system for neurodivergence. Then lo and behold, what is this person going and buying in Whole Foods? They're trying to recover. They don't try to stay sick. They try to recover from being dependent. Oh my gosh, that's fucking scary. Because they're going to learn why they became dependent. And what Epstein rings got to do with that? Every time I take responsibility over my financial situation and learn about finances, the more financially responsible I get, the more people get mad. Also, the more I recover from sexual violence, the more people get mad. Even the women. They also can't have cervical orgasms yet. I trigger that when I say, lady, that is rape. It's not, do you know what is rape? I went through rape. What you're talking about is... No, what I'm talking about is me saying no to something and that being violated, and me having misplaced arousal like people have during rape, because the nervous system needs to have the hormones to calm. And you're going around in filmmaking industry, all the people you work with had to rape a child to camera if they want to be, if they want to have a future. And even so will you, because I know that. I address to that topic. And I also pull up the hard questions because I know if they would manage to kidnap me in the past 3 years, they would put me on drugs, they would put me on this. What do you think they would do? They would force me to rape a child or something and record it. That's why I fought so hard, because I knew. And I knew that they would do that to anybody that wants to do something with their life. It's not even about climbing up the ladder. It's about the necessity. It's not even about legacy either. It's a necessity to do what we came here to do in life. They tried to traffic me so that I wouldn't do astrology outside of the cult. While the people inside the cult dependent on what people like me say, because we're not bribed by the cult. Nobody inside the cult would give them a reading. They would be able to learn what they can in themselves. This is why I'm probably the only walking astrologer that talks about Aries as the cloning project. While other people raise the pride flag, I was like, wait a second, that's the ritual abuse. When they rape people to try to make them able to have sex without love. Do you think they don't try to make them be able to have sex without love with both men and women? Do you think that gender affirming care is actually volitional extortion cults? LGBTQ will not have the rights to gender affirming care without addressing patient sovereignty. It's nice that they say, well, being LGBTQ is not a disease. Fantastic. Let's talk about sovereignty. Let's talk about the use of psychiatry against people who disobey legal orders. Let's talk about the bigger issue. because it's an outer planet issue. And when we deal with an outer planet issue, we need to tend to how is that affecting, what is the bigger theme? Because then we can get somewhere. Then we can also connect with people that share that interest. When I went with the topic of assassination prevention, and I said, wait a second, the ladies that escape their so-called narcissistic husband, they don't have solutions, but I saw, wait a second, that person that got assassinated, that journalist was told by the police exactly what those women are told, and that guy and his wife get kidnapped out of the out of the day by people that tell them that it's in their favor. Who's that guy? Running to be prime minister, parliament member. So all of us were dealing with assassination attempts. Maybe there's something we can do. Oh, but all of us were affected by the fact of extortion calls. The ladies that went out were basically not knowing that their husband was associated with a trafficking intelligence cult. The cult didn't know that the wife doesn't know, and the cult wanted the wife also under mind control so that they control everyone. Also if she's not a wife, also if they're just friends. Now, a journalist that begins to speak too much, or a politician that begins to speak too much, yes, there are those two, they're afraid because they know how much torture they put these guys through. They're afraid that they will remember, that they will have active memory. And if they will have active memory, they will need to speak to stay alive, and to remember to stay alive, and to speak what they remember, and to speak the truth, and cross through one threshold, and they're told, oh, you can't say it. This is why I argued fiercely even with people that managed to get out. I know very well even when it comes to the healing professions. I know just trafficking adults so that they wouldn't have to do the thing to the children, or evacuating people with rape out of their homes, is not okay. There's some people that say they still have to do crime. Yes, now there are even other, there are even other podcasts regarding ritual abuse that have the symbolism of the Rosicrucian. And here the amount of effort. And here's the thing, nothing that is gained by extortion cult is actually enjoyed. It's a peak of drugs, but then the down is the aftermath. Okay, they get people addicted, and they feel the approximation, that looks like manic or elated state of consciousness, okay, drug-induced. By the way, even the SSRIs that were causing manic depression were manic-inducing drugs that were given to people with depression. Well, how do you treat manic depression? You have to sleep well, do things you actually love. Okay, and one cannot work in a job that is not, definitely not in a job that has corruption, but cannot work in a job that is not truly satisfying for them, because then they will still have manic depression. And of course, having their sovereignty, sexual sovereignty. One can, if a person is not allowed to be, they will develop typhus, they will develop mental ailment, they would go completely crazy. Like, and how do we treat schizophrenia? Housing first, no longer torturing the person. I believe in the person. Finland did it because, and there's a reason why it did it, because it's in the border with Russia, and nobody could help them. and working with the Nazis wasn't so fun. So after the Second World War, they would slowly, in recent decades, develop a method called open dialogue, and that was patient-focused. They can't say it, but that was also how they managed to get strategic advantage over the KGB, because the sexpionages, Elijah, were raped so that they will have sex without love. One cannot have sex without love, is rape. Where people in the beginning are like, what about casual sex? But okay, let's see what the shadows, let's see what are the shadows that will arise when you talk about committed connection or long-term connection, whether monogamous or not. Let's see if there's not an extortion cult in the background. Uh, so those things will become very apparent because people are going to want sovereignty. With Neptune in Aries, they're going to long for sovereignty, but they will have to treat also the holistic aspect of sovereignty. And then they will start talking about these things that they dismissed, because now they will have no choice but to deal with that. And there will probably be a lot of people that will play pretend. Those are the people that would think that they will manage to get out of the concentration camp, but this is a global. And, war criminals are hunted decades after. Unless they stop ritual abuse. Yeah, in all indigenous and not indigenous cultures. But the big Neptune Aries is the channeling and divination around the face. Now, people who try to make people faces be unrecognizable because they did the face identification system That's probably a lot of the technical issues that people will deal with. Think about the term losing face. But then people, and then there would also be the invisible things that think about what people don't see on one's face. Okay? And that person doesn't look like Nicholas Stoyanovich, assassinated astrologer. He was assassinated in COVID. He said about Neptune, when it crosses, let's say, ascendant or midheaven, first house, 10th house, or 11th house, then if a person is in a place and something bad happened in the place, that person must get the fuck out of there immediately, because everybody's going to think it's them. In Israel, we had the case of Tai Rada, who was murdered in a bathroom in her school. And she was, I don't know if she was bullying the person that was keeping, okay, like, children, when children are not treated well, maybe she was a bit of a bully, I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe not, but the guy that was just doing the homekeeping at school was accused. He spent, I think, a Saturn cycle in jail. Roman Zadorov. And eventually, some people say it's not him. Eventually, he did get compensation, but after spending so much time in jail, and until now, many people say, yes, it is him. That's Neptune. Okay? So, with true crime, there can be some cases like that. But also Neptune allows certain people to evade. Against this helplessness, it can allow certain people to evade guilt, mainly because people don't get at the root cause. For example, I gave the example of the academic institution that was litigated with partial success, and then because they didn't tend to the secret society and the cult that also the parents of the lady that litigated would have been in circles that would be associated with that, or at least having to look the other way. I'm being, how should I say that? I'm being delusionally delusionally giving him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, that okay, structure wise. But because she didn't tend to that, then she had partial success. And also for the fact that the juristic system at the upper echelons is exactly, which is why they talked about people like me and just say, why didn't you litigate? Why didn't you this? Why didn't you that? I'm like, wait a second. The Supreme Court would be a mole of a bigger network, which means that he was violated as a child, had to be perpetrator as a child, had to keep doing those things, had to show that he really, really wants to continue with the network. Otherwise, he would be drug abuser, drug trafficker, and prostitute in the street or so. Like, that's what the programming that they would do. And then he was extortable, so they could trust him. And so he could do everything juristic except for acknowledging sexual boundary violation in children. And had to play like this is like if somebody, how should I say that? He had to, like everyone, he had to at least play it, that if people don't think like him, they're losers. Because they make the rules, and so on and so forth. So women like me were, people were angry. Why didn't you litigate? I said, if I have to talk about, even if it was an Epstein listed, and I have to understand, for litigation is not just, I have to understand who are the people that are doing the handling. And we're dealing with that in the juristic system. So, and the prosecution, what I did is to tend to the body-mind question and to the politics of the senses and ESP, which proves how mind control works. Now, people, when they run into this type of truth, they say, well, what can we do? What can we do? What can you do? I don't know. But if you don't do something about that to stop ritual abuse, then you will be the study case. You will be in the death camps. Your family will have to be war criminal. And your ancestors will be haunted years after your death. And that would be your legacy, even after you die. Does anybody remember Adolf Hitler as the guy that took Germany out of the almost big depression that they had in the 30s? No. Rightfully so. Oh, but Americans managed to pull it off. No, they didn't. It's not about blue or red pill. Now they had this thing that if somebody travels to the United States, even if they have visa, they look at their social media. And saying, I think even North Korea didn't do that. Not openly. Like they probably looked, but it's kind of scary to travel to a country. Forget what's happening there is happening in the world, but it's kind of scary to travel to a country that would require that. And it's the United States, a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful set of countries.